I believe every audiophile should at one point in their journey own a pair of Manepans. Just like ice cream, although not for everyone, I think Magnepan speakers will most likely impress a majority of you. Now, I've already made a video on the Magnepan LRS, and it is one of my favorite speakers for the price. Recently, I got my hands on a pair of Magnepan 0.7i. Now, that is the model above the LRS, and I had high expectations that I would love the 0.7 even more. So I called Mr. Kanta to borrow his LRS so I can do some A/B tests. And by chance, a subscriber of mine also has the Magnepan 1.7i, which I also borrowed. So LRS being the lowest model is around 650. The 0.7 is around 1,004, 1,003. The 1.7 is over 2 grand. Now logic would have it that the more expensive one is better, but what does better mean in this case? Bigger soundstage, faster transient, and so forth. Also, there's the law of diminishing return, with the 1.7i costing more than 3 times speed, 3 times better. All this was going through my head, and also I wonder if the 0.7 needed more power, a more powerful amplifier to bring out its full potential compared to the LRS. Now, as you know, Magnepan is difficult to drive. So today, my audio buddies, although I'm not going to review any of these Magnepans, I will however share with you my experience of all three, having spent time with them during the last few months. Now, before we start, I'd like to take a moment to introduce these stylish conversation starter Singapore design and built Bluetooth speakers by one of my subscribers. Now, this is not a paid advertisement, but I told Un at Soundcraft Audio that I don't mind taking 2 minutes to talk about it because, you know, I find the design interesting. It uses a 4-inch SP acoustic aluminum driver. It also has a rear-firing tweeter, which helps with creating this bigger soundstage. With the help of DSP and 50-watt amplification, the soundstage from these speakers, yeah, they're pretty good, pretty impressive. It's incredible what DSP can do. For a 4-inch driver in a small enclosure, it's mind-boggling how much bass it can output. Now, the target audience is people who already own a system and wanted a second system for casual listening. As such, these speakers are not the most resolving. However, it does have a warm sound and a clear sound. This is different compared to the other more expensive active speakers I've reviewed, such as the Kev, Klipsch, and so forth. Now, those speakers are more resolving, but not as warm sounding and stylish as these. By the way, they can play loud. And did I say the bass is pretty fun? I think the biggest selling point is the different available finishes, which you will not find in any speaker probably on this planet. You can order a pair for about 460 bucks. Did I say these speakers can really punch? To help me get a better picture of the speakers over the last few months, I had a few of my audio buddies listen to them. I'm talking about the Magnepan now. First is Loic. Loic has a YouTube channel and he recently made a video on the Galion TS 120. Please check it out and I will link the video in the first comment. Then there were Mr. Quant, Mr. Kanta, and Mr. Carver. Just before I filmed this video, I spent an afternoon with Mr. Carver seriously testing all three speakers, and I will merge everyone's experience instead of going one by one. Now, for those of you who have never seen a video on Magnepan speakers, which is impossible, let me start by telling why you should give Magnepan a try. I like how Loic described it, the hang in the air effect, airy soundstage, the vocal instrument tone you get from them is addictive. They are soundstage kings. Crazy transparency, speed, and very coherent. If you like that wall of sound presentation, big grand soundstage, and fast transient, for the money, you cannot beat Magnepan. If you have lived with Magnepan LRS for a while and go back to bookshelf speakers around the same price, you'll feel like you're listening to a tiny speaker. If you like open baffle speakers, Magnepan will be a sound you like. Loic did mention to me the only thing open baffle is better at is he can hear the skin of the drums better, for example. Now, one downside with Magnepan is the image is not precise. You know, you have a hard time cutting out the people within the soundstage, but it's fine. So the three Magnepan speakers, surprisingly, there is a significant difference in sound. With Mr. Carver, we compare all three speakers with these two CDs. Here, I put on screen. We play tracks that have male and female vocals and tracks that are mostly with instruments. The LRS and 0.7 actually sounds different. The LRS is actually more musical, while the 0.7 is more analytical. That's just my way of saying the LRS is smoother sounding, slightly more forgiving, a bit warmer, not as extended on both sides, but very enjoyable. The 0.7 is sharper, and I think there's a bottom mid-range emphasis. With the extra sharpness, you know what? We can hear the pedals of the piano better compared to the LRS. A slightly more forward presentation, the soundstage is next level compared to the LRS. However, both LRS and 0.7 transient are just as fast. So for me, because the 0.7 has a more analytical presentation where I can analyze easier what's happening, it's not a clear winner over the LRS because the difference in performance, the difference in presentation is big enough that it comes down to a question of taste. I still remember the day I first heard the LRS with the Cayin CS55. At the time, we were 3 audiophiles, and we all agreed the mid-range band just melts your heart with that smoothness. The 0.7, I don't get that feeling. With the LRS and 0.7, you kind of still need a subwoofer. The 1.7 now, you can seriously get away without a subwoofer. Although it has the same level of detail as the 0.7, it is smoother. And I think the stronger bass helps balance out the sharper top end, and it balances really well. The speaker sounds bigger, we hear more of the instrument. Not only do we hear the pedal of the piano, we can hear more of the piano, for example. The soundstage is positioned further back compared to the 0.7, less forward, but interestingly, still has the same bite. More nuance in the lower frequency. For example, the thump on the kick drum is more impactful and clearer. So the 1.7 definitely is a step up from the 0.7, while the 0.7 is not necessarily a step up from the LRS. The only thing to be careful about is the 1.7i, that extra bass might be a problem if your room is not big enough. The 1.7i, the first time I ever heard it at my place was with a DIY Class A 30 watt amplifier made by one of my audio buddies whom I'll call Mr. Amplifier. It was so smooth. And for me, I said, this is endgame setup, man. I can live with this for the rest of my life, and seriously, one of the best combo I've ever heard in my room. I could never get that magic back after I returned the DIY amp. Any amplifier I try after that, it's like a world of a difference. You see, that DIY amp, just parts alone, is around $4,000. If a company spent $4,000 in parts, yeah, expect their amplifier to cost 20 grand on the market. This got me thinking, Magnepan is great, but you really need the amplifier to drive it. I used my Mcintosh with it and I get decent results, but not everyone can afford a Mcintosh or a Higo. With my quad mono blocks, yeah, you get excellent results, but once again, not cheap. So what do I use if I cannot afford a high power expensive amp? Now, for those of you who owns Magnepan, can you put in the comments, what are you using to drive your Magnepans? I'm sure there are many affordable solutions out there with amazing results. So let's talk a bit about amplification. You know, I don't find the 1.7 is more difficult to drive when compared to the LRS. No, in fact, I think I got more volume out of the 1.7i over the 0.7i at the same volume level on my amplifier. As most of you know, the better amplification you use, the better your Magnepan will perform. If you ever get a chance to listen to the Magnepan driven by a $20,000 amp, you will wonder why are they selling the Magnepan LRS for only 650 bucks. It should be more, 3 times more. I know some people define if an amplifier can drive a speaker or not by SPL. If it can reach high SPL, that means it can drive it. For me, I don't see it that way, because most amp can drive the Magnepan to high SPL with no problem. The problem is at higher volume, or even any volume, do I hear compression? Is the bass still controlled? And finally, how is the dynamic contrast? When you drive the volume to 80 dB, does the singer still sound like an adult singing with ease? Or does it sound like a kid yelling at the top of his lungs? Both reach 80 dB volume, but one is pushing as if its life depended on it. For me, the Magnepan is not easy to drive. Very easy to lose dynamic contrast at higher volume. A question I get asked a lot is if a tube amplifier can drive their Magnepan LRS. Some people have asked me if they can drive their LRS with the Galion TS 120. Now, I'll make a separate video on it and it'll be on my Galion channel. In short, yes, but I would say there's no real point in pairing tube amplifiers to Magnepan, especially tube amplifiers that uses 4 KT88. The point of tube amplifier is for that airy soundstage, but Magnepan has that airy soundstage by default. There are better ways to spend your money for amplification. If you absolutely insist on a tube amp and need to listen at loud volume, the Cayin Soul 170i that uses KT170, no problem pushing it to concert volume level with really strong control bass. The only thing with that combo is the mid-range at high volume can be a bit on the forward side, but you definitely have the power to drive Magnepans. Class D, I know the Class A, Class D 200 watt amp that I have here is pretty good, but once again, it has an MSRP of 3 grand. Surprisingly, oh my gosh, the Buchardt I150 with its wimpy 150 watt, you know, today's Class D amp, you know, if it's not 300 watt, don't talk to me. That I150 can drive Magnepan, well, as long as you're not listening at concert volume. Mr. Cover heard the Buchardt I150 for the first time the other day, and it was with the Magnepan 0.7. He was so shocked at how good it sounded. Once again, at normal 70-ish dB volume, listening volume, he actually preferred it over the Mcintosh 6700. I never expected that. He felt there was a bit more dynamic contrast with the I150, which between you and me, man, is almost impossible. Well, then again, the Mcintosh 6700, dynamic contrast is one of his weak points. Another Class D amp that was able to drive the Magnepan was the LSA Warp 1 amp. Again, a wimpy 150 watts. You see, after I published the LSA Warp 1 amp video, LSA reached out to me telling me, Thomas, man, you got to try the Magnepan LRS again because it should be able to drive it no problem. In that video, I said, I tried it with the LRS and it was just okay. Now, I have to admit, I only played a few songs with it, and at the time, when I was testing it at Mr. Cantor's place with the LRS, he was more interested in the VTV Class D amp with tubes, so he did not care much about the LSA Warp 1. So recently I told Mr. Cantor, you gotta come over to my place to test the LRS seriously with the LSA Warp 1. But before you come over, I know you were not that impressed with the Warp 1, but I can assure you this thing has power, and I bet it can drive your Focal Sopra too. He 100% did not believe me because Sopra 2 are very difficult to drive, but I insisted, and he gave it a try. Let's put it this way, he was blown away and told me, okay, yeah, it can drive the Focal Sopra 2. Man, I should have bet money on it. Anyway, I think partially there's a slight upper bass bump with the Warp 1 that gives it that muscular feel. Now, Mr. Carver picked up on that, and whether you like that or not is a question of taste. Anyway, so I invited Mr. Cantor over, Mr. Carver, to test the Warp 1 with the 0.7, and both confirmed, yeah, it can drive the Magnepan. Just perhaps not to the level we are used to with our amplifiers that weigh as much as a refrigerator, but for the price and technology, it's more than fine. You should see Mr. Carver's amplifier. Here, let me show you a photo of the transformer inside. Now for Class AB, I did not have enough time to test any of my amps. Now, I was curious if the 50 watt topping LA90 amp can drive it or not. If you're curious, put it in the comments. So let's wrap it up at this point. I remember Mr. Carver was quite shocked at the sound differences between the LRS and the 0.7. We were wondering, how is this possible given both speakers look so similar? Do they even have a crossover? So for those of you who own LRS and thinking about upgrading to 0.7, be ready for the change in sound. For me, if you have the room, the 1.7i is the way to go. Get some good amplification, and it's the endgame setup. For those who had tried Magnepan and found it meh, I'm telling you, man, your amplifier and placements were the problem. Before upgrading your LRS, it might be wiser to get the best high power amp you can afford. When I said the 1.7i plus the DIY amp was one of the best setup I've ever heard in my room, and I have $20,000 speakers in my room before, I was not kidding, man. All right, guys, till next time.
I never think, I never know. I'm stuck and left alone. I've been lost, I've been fine. My cause is not defined. Won't you kiss me? Won't you play? Won't you draw me in a way? I could deny you, I could stray. Won't you kiss me in a way? Won't you? Come and draw me now, so come and try me now. I was never left I never think, I never know. I'm stuck and left alone. I've been lost, I've been fine. My cause is not defined. Won't you kiss me? Won't you play? Won't you draw me in a way? I could deny you, I could stray. Won't you kiss me in a way? Won't you? Come and draw me now, so come and try me now. I was never left alone. I never think, I never know. I'm stuck and left alone. I've been lost, I've been fine. My cause is not defined.